Hey, what's up everybody? It's Joe from Gadgetry Tech, and in today's video, we're going to talk about the MMX 300 Pro from Beyerdynamic. This is a Pro model. It is a more expensive model than the other MMX headphones I've covered in the past, including recently when I kind of revisited the older 100 and 150 models, but this guy is $300. Now it has a more elaborate, more premium chassis than the less expensive Beyerdynamic gaming headsets before this, and the price reflects that. It's $300. Specs, it's a 48 ohm, but very sensitive 96 decibel headphone headset. So it's still pretty easy to drive. I'm going to explain how loud these get later when you're playing on console, but I can tell you that 48 ohms is low enough for impedance, and then a 96 decibel sensitivity means that a gaming controller can run this as well. I'm starting with that because this is a gaming headset, so I'm going to be talking about gaming a lot with this, as well as music performance. As far as what's included in the box, it's relatively simple. You obviously have the headset, there's one set of pads, it's already installed, there's no extra pads to switch to, which is fine, and you have a non-removable microphone with a foam mitt that serves as a windscreen. Now you get this cable in the box, and there's a lot I like about the cable. It's not perfect for everybody, so I want to point out a few things. One, it's long and it's got some weight to it. It's a surprisingly heavy cable, so if you are playing on console gaming and you are connecting this to a controller, you have two ways to look at it. Either you leave it uncoiled and you deal with a longer cable on your lap or next to where you're sitting to kind of keep the weight down, or you may want to coil this just right so when it's plugged into your controller, because you have to use this little Y adapter that's included, that will add some weight to it. If you coil it high, it's going to be pulling on your headset. It might feel kind of weird. There's no real microphonics issues. It's helped by the way it's terminated because it comes out at an angle. But just keep that in mind. As far as the length goes, though, at 8 feet, it's better suited for a desk setup, because if you have a DAC that's on your desk, let's say it's behind your keyboard or a little bit further away, that longer cord still gives you the freedom you need to move around your desk. It's not overly long like some other stuff out there, but it is a little on the longer side. Another thing I like about this cable is how it's terminated. Now, there's a pro and con to this. Some people, if you're getting this for console, you may not like seeing this Y adapter. This is there for a reason. Now, some headsets will give you two different cables in the box. The EPOS H6 Pro, the Drop PC38X, it has one cable that has a TRRS jack, which is basically a multi-pin jack that includes your headset audio and your microphone, and a single plug, and then this would go into the headset. The other cable that they give you is something like this, where it is broken out, where you have a separate headset or headphone and microphone connection. This terminates into the TRRS, so it's everything you need to work on controller. But the reason why they do it this way, I wish it came with two cables just to have one that's a little bit easier for controller use. However, the reason why it's done like this is they actually break out the ground from the microphone. This is so important, because some headsets, if it's TRRS only, and then you get a Y adapter to break it out, and I'll give you an example. This is the Creative GC7. I also have the Shit Hell 2 I'll show after. The GC7 has a separate microphone and headphone jack. Now, if you have a headset that comes with a combined jack, let's say that the only cable that's included is this TRRS, and then you buy an adapter to split it for your headphone and microphone jack, you are sharing the ground with the microphone and the headphone. And what happens is if you turn it up really loud, because of that shared ground and some crosstalk issues, your friends will likely hear some of the game audio through the chat, because that ground is picked up on your microphone return line and sent into your DAC. By having it dedicated and split off entirely in the cable, there is no microphone ground touching the headphone jack, which means that when you connect it to a DAC like this, you will have crystal clear audio on your game side, your microphone won't be impacted, and your friends or whoever you're playing with won't hear the game audio picked up through the microphone signal. So this is why they do that. It's also why some brands have two cables in the box. But if you ever have crosstalk issues, that's the science behind it. Now, the cable also has a couple controls on it, and they all work. You have a microphone mute switch. It's probably my favorite thing about the control layout. It is a very easy tactile mute, and down is off, up is on. You can feel it in your hand without looking down at it, which I like. Now, the volume wheel, there's a pro and a con to this. My first take is it's small and chintzy and comes across very cheap. This doesn't feel like a $300 headset volume wheel. However, one of the nice things about having such a small wheel is you won't accidentally bump it on your sleeve as much. So some of the ones that have a much bigger cable, you end up turning it up or down inadvertently. The other thing to note is if you're using a game DAC like the one I just showed you, you want this volume to be turned all the way up and then use your game DAC to adjust the volume from there. So this is more of like a secondary way of adjusting volume. It just depends what you're connecting to, but keep that in mind and check it if you find that your headset's not getting loud enough. Maybe you turned it down. The other thing this has is a little action button. Now I tested this on my Mac, so if you are converting it to a TRRS connection, for example, I was listening to Tidal music and I could just hit this button and it would play and pause Tidal just fine. This isn't gonna work on a lot of things, but it is a functional. It does that like that action button that a lot of inline mics have. So that's basically it though. There's no real microphonics issues. It doesn't tangle too much. So I like the cable overall. The only criticism is I wish there was a second one in the box that was shorter and better suited for controllers and console players, but that's about it. Now, as far as build quality and comfort goes, this is a typical Beyerdynamic build quality. On the high-end side, this represents more of their more flagship builds than it does the cheaper stuff as far as build goes. You have a detachable headband pad, so you can unsnap this and remove it, and that exposes the metal chassis inside. This is nice if you either want to change pads entirely or if this wears out over time. The other thing that's nice about this particular pad is it has that indent there, which relieves some top pressure. Good if you're wearing a hat. Also good if you're hooking it on a stand. It's going to preserve the headband's shape overall. But you have the aluminum forks here. You have a mix of plastics and aluminum, but Beyerdynamic headphones are just built like tanks, especially ones like these, and it's no different here. Now the pads are also very, very similar to all other Beyerdynamic pads that I've covered. It's a little bit stiff. You have a velour pad here. It's not crazy deep. This measures at about 25 millimeters deep if you compress it, maybe 24 millimeters. The issue is this pad has an acoustic disc on it, and that sticks out. It protrudes a little bit. And immediately of putting it on, like even with my hat, the pads touch my ears a little bit. So this is going to be the biggest detractor for me as far as comfort goes. If you have larger ears or you don't like feeling your ears pressed against a baffle, this is padded, but it's a noteworthy thing. I don't think everyone is going to like the comfort of this headphone. Clamp force is a little bit on the stronger side, and it's comparable to other Beyerdynamic headphones. Not as strong as some other models out there, but definitely a little bit clampy. It's a lighter chassis at 314 grams, so overall, with the breathability of the velour pad, medium to slightly firm clamp force, I think it's comfortable enough. I had immediate discomfort. However, interestingly, I could play on it for a long period of time and I didn't feel like I had to remove it. It didn't feel great, but it never got worse. And I think partly because I'm not just touching a hard baffle, this is padded, which helps. Now this acoustic disc on the front has several impacts on things. It's obviously there for comfort, but this is also used as a tuning disc. So this affects the treble delivery, and I'll get into sound quality, but it's there for a reason. It's not just designed to protrude out, and removing it will inadvertently affect your treble and make the treble even stronger. Finishing off the build quality, it does have a telescoping yoke, which I like, so obviously it's going to adjust well. I've never had issues with Beyerdynamic headphones fitting small or larger heads. They seem to have one of the better chassis out there that scales really well for different head sizes. The only thing to consider is these pads are more firm when you first get them, and they eventually shape a little bit to your head. So if you wear glasses for long periods of time and the temples of your glasses are a little bit thicker, I think the slightly firmer pad with stronger clamp force is not going to be the best suited for glasses. If you're looking for a closed back gaming headset better suited for glasses, I think the VZR Model 1s are a little bit more comfortable there, and I'll compare the sound of those after as well. Now Beyerdynamic also has a customization program, so if you like the way the chassis is built and everything else about it, but you want to change the looks, they have the ability to print your gamer tag on the fork and even change this disc. I don't really know how to do it myself because this seems to be glued, so I'm not sure if that's like a permanent thing. The microphone also is not detachable. Now there is a weird thing with the mic. I'm going to just get into this now. It is not a flip to mute mic. It's just literally to move it out of the way. The muting mechanism is only on the cable. This is a very stiff rotating mechanism, and if I do it like I go to mute from the microphone itself, you could see if I go slow, it's actually just bending the mic. It wasn't flipping. I have to kind of do it more in the middle. Now I'm even moving my headset. Look, I can actually lift it off my head a little bit. So it's a little bit stiff. I wish it was just slightly looser. The other weird thing is it spins all the way around the other way. Technically, if you're okay with the cable going backwards, you can reverse your left and right channel and wear the mic on the right side. But otherwise, I'm not sure why it would flip back so far. because this is as stiff as it is, you almost get a really strong vibrating sensation on your head. It's like a head massager that, like, you know, shakes your head a bit. So ergonomically, that's really the only downside to me, aside from the pad depth and that clamp for some. I think the microphone rotation could be a little bit softer. It would be easier to use. Telescoping wise, the memory effect is excellent. I can get the mic exactly where I want it. So you have a 13mm microphone capsule here, foam sock to protect from plosives. It doesn't block all of it, but it helps. Some of that is literally just positioning the mic in the right spot. But when the foam sock is on, the microphone has a little nub that sticks out, and that's obviously the front of it. There's a little mesh windscreen on it as well. So if you're not sure how it's facing, because this is a cardioid pickup pattern, it's going to have some passive noise isolation or noise rejection to block out background noise like a keyboard. So you want to make sure this bump is pointing at your mouth to get the best possible pickup pattern and warmth.
And this is what the MMX 300 Pro microphone sounds like. Being a wired headset connected to something like the Creative GC7 DAC, it sounds incredible. I mean, there's a lot of warmth to it thanks to that 13mm capsule. And because it has a cardioid pickup pattern, if I type on a keyboard rather loudly, you could still hear the keyboard quite loud, or clearly I should say, but it's not as loud as it would have been if I had an omnidirectional microphone, which typically sound more clear, but they pick up all of the background noise. So you always have to kind of pick what microphone suits what you're looking for. But as a gaming headset, I think this is fantastic. All right, and just for fun, this is what my voice sounds like on the MMX 300 Pro using an Xbox controller wirelessly connected to my PC. So if you're playing on console, this is closer to what people will actually hear on that side. If you're plugged into a controller, there's going to be some static and it won't sound as clear, but still not bad. Now, just to keep things transparent, this is the Astro A50X, the newest wireless headset from Astro. And to me, it's the best wireless microphone I've ever heard, and it's one of the best overall sounding microphones for a gaming headset. I wanted to show you what this sounded like in the default sound profile, and if I switch to my sound profile that I custom EQ, this is what my voice sounds like. It's a great mic. It's comparable in different ways, but I think it showcases just how good the MMX 300 mic is as well.
So let's talk about sound quality, shall we? And I want to start with the objective side, which takes my opinion out of it. I use a Gross style Pinaclone. It's a KB006X using an IEC711 coupler and then an XLR interface. So that's how I measure it. All of my measurements on the site you're about to see are using that same exact rig. So if you want to compare against other headsets and headphones, I've been really expanding this database a lot. I've measured dozens, if not at least 100 at this point. So looking at the measurements, it's going to follow a similar trend here to a different Beyerdynamic headphone that I reviewed only a month or two ago. To summarize this sound profile, it does have elevated bass. Now this is a closeback, meaning it blocks some of the outside noise. I think they said it has about a negative 18 decibel attenuation. It does have good passive noise isolation on that note, but because of the velour pads being a little bit breathable, you are going to have some sound leakage. Now, thankfully, it didn't hurt the bass to have the leakage. This has a very strong bass shelf. It's pronounced, and you have something called a mud cut or a mid-bass scoop. When you look at like that 200 to 250 hertz area, and there's the dip here, that is effectively reducing that mid-bass bloat or muddiness that often happens. If you have too much emphasized bass down low and it carries into the mids, it ends up making things sound boxy and congested regardless of how much treble you have, and to me that's a negative effect. It is a tad leaner in the 300 to 500 hertz range, so if you're looking for more weight to a guitar and they sound a little bit cold, just simply boosting, let's say 350 hertz by a decibel or two with a Q factor of like 1.5 to 2. Adjust it to your liking, but I think that'll warm it up just a little bit without really affecting the mud, if you will. But there is a stronger bass shelf here, and the channel matching is excellent as well. Now, anytime you get a headphone or a headset, even if I measured 3 of these on the same rig, there's a chance I'm going to have a slightly different measurement from each. There's something called driver variance. From what I can tell, the Stellar 45 driver that this uses, which is the same driver found in the 770 Pro X limited edition and the 700 and 900X headphones, has less driver variance than some of the older Beyerdynamic headphones, which is great for 2 reasons. It means that different people getting different versions of the same headphone should have the same listening experience, and it also means the left and right driver should more closely match, which impacts your imaging performance and consistency. Now, I really do like the mid-range performance of the 300 Pro. It's one of the best mid-ranges on a passive closeback with the focus on gaming, something that has a mic. It's excellent, frankly, and it works really well for both gaming and music. There is a little bit of an elevation at about 2700 hertz. I believe it's actually closer to 28 if I'm not mistaken. So this one, actually, yeah, it's 2500 hertz. So you can slightly reduce that 1 or 2 decibels if you find it to come across shouty, but it's mild enough where I don't really have an issue with it. Now, this is where some people are going to have a qualm with this sound signature, and that's the peak at 6000 hertz. Now, I reviewed the 770 Pro X not too long ago, and when you compare the sound signatures between the two, you can see they're almost identical. So I want to start by saying, think of the 300 Pro as being a headset gaming version of the 770 Pro X. And just like the Beyerdynamic Tiger 300R compared to the older like 880s and other comparable headphones in that class, for some reason, they smooth out the gaming or the treble on the gaming models, which I actually prefer for music as well. Some of this emphasized upper treble helps relieve some congestion on the gaming side too. So if you're playing a single story game or open world game or anything where you want to preserve some of that vastness in space, that emphasized upper treble is going to help for that. It's not going to make it sound as congestion. And it's kind of important because this has a bass shelf. You don't want too little of upper treble because then it sounds really dark, and I don't think it's going to be as enjoyable for what a lot of people prefer, especially on the gaming side. Measurements aside, I think how we hear it and what our preferences are much more important. The measurements are there to help give you a very objective and unbiased comparison to other headphones and headsets measured on the same rig, just so you can literally compare apples to apples. As far as how I hear this and what I've liked about it, the sound signature isn't exactly my cup of tea, but there are some songs where it really showcases this kind of sound signature's pros, in my opinion. There's a new song called Divine by Salika and Kid Cudi. It's a hip-hop-ish R&B song. It has great female vocals and male vocals with 2 different tones, good extended bass. It has some guitar strings in it, and it also has this, typical Kid Cudi sound where there's a lot of fun synths and digital effects that are kind of creating this really nice image and presentation. Usually I like his music more for speakers because it showcases that kind of bass extension and depth while also having that fun imaging play. But these just showcase both voices really well. There is no sibilance. I had this amazing deep bass note that had surprisingly good texture to it. I don't know if it's a byproduct of the disc, but I really liked the way the bass of these sounded on that song. And then when all of the layering of instruments and noises rolled in later, this upper treble emphasis really just made them sound quite wide. For a closeback to have a relatively smooth target profile, basically when you look at those measurements, because there's no massive peaks and dips, it has a pretty coherent sound signature. There's not like one part is really dark and then another part comes in too strong. And that helps with songs like that. It really lets you enjoy the sense of space that the artist was intending to create, and that does translate into gaming as well. I did find that if you have a deeper male vocal, someone with a lot of depth to his voice, they sound a little bit warmer than neutral on this headset, and there's also equally somewhat distant as well. This isn't super forward. I think something like the Sennheiser 490 Pro or even the Tiger 300R or the HD 650 line, they have a little bit better presence in the mid-range as far as having the voice step forward more. Now none of those have the same bass depth and impact as this. So if you're listening to a lot of hip hop or EDM music, this is a much more preferable sound signature for those people. If you find those other reference headphones to sound a little bit boring to you, or you're lacking that punch or excitement up top, then this is something that you'll like. And so it really just comes down to what you listen to. If you're primarily focused on acoustics and vocals and you want as much clarity and forwardness in that mid-range as possible, well, when you have emphasized bass and upper treble, the byproduct of that is vocals step back just a little bit. So just keep that in mind. EQ can go a long way, but out of the box, that's just how it presents everything. Now, those acoustic discs, they have another impact on the sound. It's not just taming the treble, but they do cut the detail preservation just a little bit. So whenever you have an acoustic impedance or something in between the driver and your ear, it's safe to expect that it's reducing or attenuating the output of said driver. It's kind of like if you have a thin curtain in your room and you hold it in front of your mouth and speak, on the other side of that curtain, your voice isn't going to quite sound the same. And it's the same idea with the fleece disc. So if you are looking for the ultimate detail preservation, then something with a disc like this isn't going to be it. Something like an open back that does not have the same disc in front of it, such as the 650, 600, 6XO line from Sennheiser, they're going to sound just a little bit more resolving in the frequencies they excel at. So keep that in mind. One benefit of this is if you have, a poorly recorded track or a track that has some of the stuff you don't want to hear because it's either too harsh or just honestly a lower quality recording. Maybe you have a hiss or a couple pops or something. This will help mask that a little bit. So keep that in mind. And this does scale surprisingly well. These don't scale as well as some other high-end headphones I've used, but they do benefit from a little bit more power. So they get loud on a controller, but if you are looking for more of the music studio-like experience, then you can get a more powerful amp and benefit from that. Okay, so I want to talk about gaming performance because to me, this is what makes this particular headset a much better value than what it's perceived to be on purely the music side. These have a great sound signature for all kinds of gaming. Now, I do custom game targets, and games like Call of Duty and Apex and more to come have different game targets where I think this will excel at. And when you look at the sound signature of this to something like my Call of Duty target, it falls in line pretty well, and I'm really, really happy with the sound signature to a point where I really didn't feel like I needed to do any EQ to enjoy that game. It has a great sense of bass depth, which helps with immersion, so right when that deep frequency hits or an explosion in the distance, it just sounds so good on this, and I was still able to pick up and perceive footsteps with ease. Now that upper treble tuning, the forwardness at 3K or 2500 hertz, these pads being a little bit more breathable for long gaming sessions, it just provides an incredible experience for competitive gaming while also being great for immersive gaming. So if you don't just play competitive FPS, but you still play Astro's Playroom or Ratchet and Clank, or you're playing Cyberpunk at night, something that's just like a casual pickup game, just to kind of get away from all the stress of the high intensity esports style stuff, you can still enjoy the same headset and benefit from that sound signature too, because that bass depth and openness up top is going to really put you in the game. Now, there's a pro and a con of a closed back. Open back headsets are more breathable. You hear your environment more, which can be a pro and a con. So if you have a loud computer fan, let's say you have a desktop running a high-powered graphics card and it's spinning up all the time, even if an open back was tuned better, if you're competing with exterior noise, such as PC fans, you're not going to hear that subtle footstep. And that is where closed backs become more competitive, because they block out more external sound so you can only hear the game. That also means you don't have to turn your headset up as loud to hear those subtle things, because you're not trying to compensate for environmental noise. If your room was dead quiet and you didn't have to compete with that, then there's no specific reason why a closed back would be better for FPS gaming. You really just want as much detail and cohesion as possible from the left and right drivers so you can quickly pinpoint stuff. But this is one of those things where it's the right balance of isolation for me. I honestly, this is up there with my favorite closed back for gaming, period. That's a big statement for me. If you followed my channel, if you're okay with an analog headset, I like the breathability of this. I can wear it for a while. There's a reason why I like certain equipment for gaming. And the reason why I talk about this guy a lot is I have a game to chat mix wheel. This has the separate cable. I plug it into the GC7. I adjust my game volume. I'm wearing this. It's blocking out my high-end graphics card, so I'm not hearing the other noise, but it leaks just enough where if a kid is calling for me, I can still hear what's going on in my house. It's just the right balance for me, and that's super, super important for how I use it personally. Then when I connect it to a DAC like this, I have game to chat mix very easy to adjust. That's super important on a FPS game where sometimes you can't hear them over the helicopter noise, so you fade to them. Maybe in between games, you don't want to hear all the other noise. Give your ears a rest. And then when you're in a competitive game or you're in the gulag or some area where it's just you and an enemy and your friends are talking, you can fade all the way to game very quickly. I'm not using this to sell the DAC, but this is the benefit of a headset like this that allows you to use physical hardware to quickly adjust it. Otherwise, if you didn't have this option, then I go straight into preferring a headset with onboard, very easy to adjust game to chat mix, which a lot of headsets don't have. So it's this combination where if you get something like a GC7 and the MMX 300 Pro, you're $500 all in, but you have a seriously world-class gaming experience for both movies, music, and competitive and immersive gaming. It's seriously an awesome balance. The only other one that I've used on a gaming headset that's a closed back consistently is the VZR Model 1. Now the VZR Model 1 is more comfortable for me. There's no onboard controls. It's just a mic mute. There's no volume adjustment, so you have to use the DAC anyway. That sound signature is very, very bass heavy that bleeds into the mids. It has a very boxy sound with recessed upper mids and treble. So I've always said that with the Model 1, you have to EQ it for my personal preference to fully enjoy it. Has great imaging performance. This one is not as comfortable, but doesn't require EQ to the extent that that does. I can just plug and play on this. And again, that whole balance of noise isolation and everything else. I really think this is a solid headset. And if you're okay with just having something that's pure analog, this is easily one of the best closed back setups you can get for gaming, especially if you consider also using it for other content consumption as well, like music and movie use. If you're concerned about volume for gaming on console, because this is analog and Beyerdynamic typically requires a little bit more amp power, they have a history of higher impedance headphones. 48 ohms, 96 dB, super easy to drive. I got 102.6 decibels of output using an Xbox controller when I was firing a rifle in Call of Duty. And using that same rifle on a PlayStation controller, I got 108.4 decibels. So that is more than enough volume to cause hearing loss. I didn't measure that on my ear, of course. I used a calibrated SPL meter. So there's more than enough headroom for controller players. And then if you want more power on the PC side, you can use a higher end DAC. This is the Shit Hell 2, the new one. And you can get, this comes with the adapter, a 1/4 inch adapter. This has a separate microphone volume for the mic input. And then you can use the adapter to plug the headphone jack into this and get your master volume. So you have tons of options with this. You don't need a lot of power to enjoy it, which is great. Okay, so some big statements were made on the MMX 300 Pro. Now this is $300. It's not cheap. It doesn't have any real features. So if you're comparing it to a wireless headset, it's not fair to compare apples to apples because they're a downgrade in certain areas, but an upgrade when it comes to features and functionality. If you don't care for all those bells and whistles, the advantage of a very well-made analog headset is that it's going to last you years. Like this could last a decade or more easily. You have a detachable cord, so if the cord fails, you can replace it. If the pads fail and start to compress, because pads wear out over time, you can just buy new pads. This uses the same ring design as many other Beyerdynamic headphones out there, so it's very easy to service. Now the pads are a little bit more shallow and firm for my personal preference. You do have options like Wicked Cushions and Deconi to upgrade the pads or at least switch them. It will impact the sound. I didn't like the Wicked Cushion pad on this too much because it boosted bass too much while also reducing treble in mid-range, and it just made it too dark sounding. The Deconi Elites and like the Velour and the hybrids to me are probably a better option to consider, especially if you wear glasses or if you're sensitive to baffle pressure on your ear. It's a great headset otherwise. I think that's the biggest detractor is the pad comfort, depending on your ear size. So hopefully you found this video helpful. Now this was sent to me for review. I am sending this back. I don't have any kickbacks or monetary things. I had a lot of good things to say. The 770 Pro X limited edition was also sent to me for review, and I was more critical of that. This is similar, but the impact of those discs to tame the treble should not be underestimated. It really transformed it in a very positive way. So to me, it's a pretty good value, and I've enjoyed playing with this. I've been gaming on this all week, and I've just loved it, to be honest. So hopefully you found the video helpful. If you have any questions, shoot me a comment below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'd love to see you at the next video. Stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.